Welcome to the Tuesday, February 28th, 2023 Long-Term Water Supply Workshop. Director Chan is attending an aqua conference and excused. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Chan is excused. Director Coleman?
Present.
Director Linney?
Here.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Patterson?
Present.
Director Young?
I'm here.
President Katz.
Here. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. Madam Secretary, are there any public comments?
Currently, there are no hands raised for public comment.
Okay. And I don't have any speaker cards here,
Correct.
so we will proceed to the workshop. General Manager Chan.
Good morning, board members. So if the last two droughts in the recent atmospheric rivers have shown us anything, it's that the impact of climate change and the prediction of extreme weather events is real and upon us. Climate change and new laws and regulations are challenging the reliability of our water supplies. Fortunately, as a result of our long-term water supply planning, we have a diverse portfolio that has helped us manage through the last several droughts. The fact that at the end of the last water year, our water supply was in better shape than the prior year speaks to the success of our planning and our customers' efforts to conserve water. Today, we'll share with you not only some of our accomplishments, but also our plans to continue to build a reliable and resilient water supply portfolio. We're going to cover a number of topics, and we'll pause at the end of each section to take questions from the board. We have a number of presenters today, beginning with Mike Tognolini, our Director of Water and Natural Resources. Mike.
Thank you, Clifford. Good morning, President Katz and members of the board. We're happy to present today our annual long-term water supply workshop.
Click inside the
There
there we go.
got it. On the agenda for today, we're going to cover our workshop goals and objectives, a brief summary of our challenges and supply strategy, and really focus the day on our water supply portfolio update and some of the key topics. We're not going to cover every single project in our portfolio in great detail. We're going to focus on places where there have been significant changes or where we're looking for policy review and input from the board directly. And then we'll review our next steps when we're all done. Here are all our speakers for today. These are the experts in their fields with respect to supplemental water supply, recycled water, conservation, and other topics. They'll each be speaking on an important matter that we're going to be covering today with a lot of content. You're welcome to ask questions at any time, of course, but if you can hold off until the end of each presenter's section, that will allow us to efficiently move through the entire presentation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda Hu, our Manager of Water Supply Improvements.
Thank you, Mike. So for today's workshop, we intend to provide updates on elements of the water supply portfolio and also seek feedback from the board on the key elements of the water supply plan. So first, just a quick review of our long-term water supply strategy. The goal is to ensure a reliable, high-quality water supply for the future by obtaining supplemental supplies, by continuing our water conservation efforts, by implementing and expanding recycled water projects, and by planning for climate change accordingly. So Clifford touched upon some of the water supply challenges that impact our water supply. These include climate change that impacts our water supply availability, extreme droughts, which we've experienced over the last few years, and on the flip side, extreme rainfall, which we've seen in the last few months. Also, there's the threat of earthquake that could impact our raw water system and our system here locally, as well as new laws and regulations, and the threat of more wildfire that could impact our watersheds. And in response to these challenges, or due to these challenges, the future reliability of the district's existing sources of water supply are uncertain. And in response, we are pursuing a diverse water supply portfolio to improve reliability and resiliency. So our diverse water supply portfolio approach includes what you see here in this graphic: water transfers, recycled water, planning for groundwater, monitoring the desalination industry, developing regional partnerships such as Los Vaqueros expansion project, and water conservation. And the next series of speakers will provide updates on our efforts, but really focus on the key topics you see here, including Freeport and wheeling potential, our recycle water efforts and the upcoming plan updates of our groundwater projects and the Los Vaqueros project, as well as next steps. And if we do have time, we can take a short break and then return with updates on water conservation efforts and advanced metering infrastructure, and then conclude with voluntary agreement updates. We do have quite a bit of materials to cover today at just under 70 slides. So with that, I'm going to transition over to Hassan Abdullah, who will provide a summary on Freeport and the wheeling potential.
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, directors. I'm going to present to you on Freeport use and wheeling potential. We built Freeport to acquire supplemental supplies, including CBP supplies. This is a summary of CBP allocation over the past 5 droughts. As you can see, the trend is moving downwards. In the last 2 droughts, we received either 50% or less allocation from CBP. In fact, in 2022, we only received 0% allocation. In short, CBP allocations have been curtailed due to many reasons. That includes climate change impacts, regulatory constraints, or additional environmental demands. This is a summary of our Freeport use since we built it in 2011. During the last 2 droughts, we used Freeport in 2014, 15, 2021, and 22. In total, we diverted 139,000 acre-feet through Freeport for our use and for Contra Costas. I have an asterisk on the 2014 50% allocation because we received 50% allocation in 2014, but we diverted only 15%. So over the past 4 years, on average, we have diverted 21,000 acre-feet of CBP water. That's an annual average, and about 13,000 water transfer. If we had taken the full 50% allocation in 2014, then our CBP allocation would have been 33,250. In either case, these numbers are lower than what we had planned for when we completed our WSMP 2040 in 2012. So the key points are CBP supplies are less than what we had planned for. Water transfers are closer to our plan. Based on the CBP trend going forward, we may need to rely more on water transfers to make up the CBP shortfalls. To that end, we are working with Placer County Water Agency and Yuba County Water Agency to develop long-term water transfer agreements with them that will provide us up to 57,000 acre-feet of water in 1 year. And the other point is that the Freeport is not being utilized as planned. We have unused capacity available. We built Freeport for providing supplemental supplies for our use during droughts and emergencies. Freeport is reserved for our EBMUD's use during droughts and emergencies. But what about the non-drought years? If there is capacity and we are not using it, are we open to letting other legitimate bona fide users or other agencies use Freeport when we don't need it? An example would be our LVE partners. Could they use Freeport in non-drought years to fill LVE when we are not using it? In fact, we looked at that example. In non-drought years, could we provide wheeling between October and February for LVE partners? And I have some results to share with you in the next slide. But the bigger question is that why should we even consider wheeling for other agencies? That's because by law we are kind of obligated. Water Code Section 1810 through 1814 requires an agency to wheel transfer water for other bona fide users if conveyance capacity is available, provided that certain conditions are met. And these conditions are wheeling agency receives fair compensation, and the wheeling operation does not injure any legal users of the water or adversely impact fish, wildlife, in-stream benefits, or the economy. If these conditions are met, we are obligated to wheel. Plus, wheeling supports regional partnerships and may improve regional reliability and resiliency. And also, on top of it, if fair compensation is received, wheeling can recover some of the capital costs that have already been spent to, to construct a facility that is not being fully utilized. For example, when we looked at the LVE partners using Freeport during non-drought years between the months of October and February, we found out that we could collect revenue up to $140 million by letting other partners use Freeport. It's total 80 years of 80, yes. Yeah, 82, I think, to be exact, is the modeling period. But wheeling does have an impact on our operations. We get water supply from three sources: McCallamy, our primary source, local supply, and during droughts, Freeport, Sacramento River supply. Whenever the water quality a customer receives depends on the blend of the three supplies that we are using during that time, and also the location of the customer relative to the location of our treatment plants. Whenever we bring in Sacramento River water, whether it's for drought supply or for wheeling operations, we may need to make some operational changes. And these operational changes may result in changing the water quality blend some customers receive. But these changes are always within the range of variations the customers experience under our normal operations between drought and non-drought years. And in all cases, the water quality that we serve always meets or exceeds all regulatory standards. In order to protect our customers for individual wheeling projects, what we are planning to do is we have gotten some guidance from the board in terms of key wheeling principles. We will develop project-specific requirements for that particular wheeling project on top of the key wheeling principles that the board has already adopted. And every time we develop a wheeling project, we will bring it to the board for consideration. The board has adopted two sets of wheeling principles: the Freeport unassigned capacity principles in 2017 and the Moraine wheeling principles in 2022. The foundational principles for these key principles are: it must meet EBMUD's needs first, must not adversely impact EBMUD customers, must make EBMUD's customers whole, and also must not compete with EBMUD in securing water supplies or any other areas. Next steps, we are continuing to work with other agencies requesting wheeling. We plan to evaluate each request individually. We have the key principles that have been adopted by the board, and then on top of them, for every wheeling project, we will develop project-specific requirements to further protect us. We are currently working with the LVE partners in developing project-specific wheeling requirements. We will also consider wheeling partners' conservation programs and evaluate whether there are potential benefits that come from the wheeling operations. In every case, as I mentioned before, once developed, we will bring these project-specific requirements to the board for consideration. That is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
thought we were doing the comments at the end, but that's fine.
At the end of each section.
Each.
So we
Okay,
did a great-
section.
We did a great job letting him get to the end of his section.
Thank you.
I've never seen this before, so let's keep it up and we'll end on time. Director Coleman.
Yeah, I just, on slide 14 on the wheeling issue, I hope that we do go in the direction of opening it up because we can help recover our financial costs that was over $500,000 when we built Freeport. And since we're not able to use it all the time because of the CVP contractors, I think it also builds goodwill in times of drought or other issues when we're allowing people to use Freeport as a facility when we don't need it, when we may need help from them at some point. Just my comment.
Director McIntosh, and then Director Young.
Is this revenue neutral for us? Can we make money?
On principle, we cannot make money, but we can recover all of the capital costs that have already been spent on it, meaning that portion of it, plus any costs that we have, including operations, maintenance, labor, chemicals, plus any rehab costs that may come in the future.
Okay.
So it would be cost neutral to us in every possible way.
Okay. So you spoke about some customers will experience a different water quality. Which customers?
Well,
What region?
sure. Okay, under a normal operations, a customer receives water from the treatment plant. When we bring in Freeport water and that's only treated in 3 of our treatment plants. So all the customers around that area will receive either local supplies or Freeport water or a blend of some proportion.
Yes, so typically, the water goes to San Pablo, so
Right.
coming out of
So,
Sobrante Water
my
Treatment Plant,
region.
that would be in your particular ward, Upper San Leandro Water Treatment Plant, so that goes down Hayward, San Leandro, San Lorenzo, Oakland, up to Piedmont. And then in prior years, depending on the quality of water, sometimes we put some water into Briones. And even this year, we're contemplating treating some of that water, if it were necessary and the water quality met the requirements and the Division of Drinking Water approved it, we would have treated some of it at Walnut Creek Water Treatment Plant. But predominantly San Pablo and Upper San Leandro reservoirs, and then depending on the situation, it could also go to the inline plants as well.
As usual.
Yeah, I have a couple questions and then a comment or concern. So on wheeling though, of necessity, does the water have to go through our system or no?
Well,
I mean, it could, if it goes to LV, it wouldn't, there wouldn't be an impact on our water quality. We wouldn't be changing, our source water, correct?
That is
If we're
correct.
doing LV, which is, of course, many years down the road.
Yes.
Okay. And then, are there other scenarios where Wheeling would not, use our treatment capacity, or where our customers would not be impacted?
Well, the way wheeling would work is you bring in the water, Sacramento River water, and we put it in our reservoirs. And if you're treating from there, it would get the blend of fresh water that has been brought in and the water that had already been sitting there in the reservoir.
Right, I get that. I guess what I'm so basically, if Grasslands wants us to wheel water for them, say, we store it, and LV isn't built yet, or expanded yet, that water, we treat the water that they don't need treated and send McCullamy water to them? Where does the, if we're, thanks. I just want to really understand how we're.
Sorry, so yeah, I understand the question. Wheeling that involves the raw water system only. So for example, water to Los Vaqueros or water to Contra Costa Water District, or in the future maybe to San Joaquin County or someone like that. Any of that wheeling as long as we can dedicate aqueducts to that individual flow, we should be able to treat it without changing the quality delivered to our customers. However, there are still operational changes that need to be made. It may require additional pumping into Briones later in the spring to refill because we've dedicated an aqueduct to Wheeling. So there are operational effects, but potentially less or no water quality effects if it's only on the raw water side.
Okay. And then my other question goes to the current, sort of like how we're sitting in terms of Freeport. We based our projections and costs and everything on a certain amount of pumping and capacity and use. We're dramatically below that. So what's the difference in, what have we so far been stuck with in terms of the costs of having Freeport? I mean, I know there's been benefits, but because it's cheaper than transfers, because you don't have to pay for the transfer water, but
The capital cost is already spent.
I understand that. But the capital
but
cost was
the
based on a
O&M
certain amount of, understanding a certain amount of capacity over
Right.
the life of the
Sure.
facility, right?
So when we bring in less water through Freeport, two things happen. One is your O&M cost for less water is lower. That's one.
Sure.
But your per unit cost of that water kind of goes up.
Right, so
Because
what is
you're-
it? What has it been? What did we think it was gonna be, and what has it been?
We have not done that.
we've done that calculation.
Okay. Well, it looks like we've gotten about half of what we thought we were gonna get or take, yeah?
Also, because of environmental documentation, when you do AIRs, EISs of facilities, you do look at the higher end of usage. It's not that our business model was based on these numbers. It's mostly.
Well, I'd like to know what our business model was based on. I wasn't on the board then, I don't, if I had to dig for those documents, so it'd be helpful. Then my last comment, I basically started my career in water fighting the peripheral canal. And I'm quite concerned that we've built one. And that in the absence of a cross delta facility or other, conveyance that the state operates, we're going to get stuck with operating a facility that bypasses the delta ourselves, when I don't think that was ever our intent. And so the idea that this facility becomes, the way to deal with I think we are potentially walking into or backing ourselves into a corner where we're required to do it under certain conditions. We better be damn sure that the environmental considerations and other things that are being taken into account are, I see a firestorm coming our way, in the worst, in the worst case scenario. I can see a best case scenario, maybe, but it troubles me that we might actually be operating this more for others than for us. And even if we're, sort of made whole, yeah, I'll stop there.
Let me interject real quick, Marguerite. I helped negotiate the Freeport deal, and when it was set up, it was strictly for East Bay Mud needs, with the understanding there might be water wheeling. If we're going to wheel water down in the future, it would still have to go to the board for approval, and all the environmental agencies have to be involved. So it's not just like, it's multiple layers of environmental review and then board approval to do it. So there is some safeguards in that respect.
Yeah, a couple of points to mention. First is the scale of the Freeport project, which is an order of magnitude, 2 orders of magnitude smaller than what they're talking about for delta conveyance. So it can't be a replacement for, the peripheral canal or delta conveyance or whatever the current proposal is for the delta. Secondly, it's not, so we have an asset that's not used, the Freeport facility, that would move water as far as the McKelmy aqueducts. But in order to get it all the way around the delta, you also have to access the McKelmy aqueducts from about Comanche across the delta to near Bixler. That part of the system is nearly always in operation for East Bay Mud, has quite a bit of capital projects lined up that are going to limit access to those particular facilities. So the district has a lot of discretion, especially when it comes to the McKelmy aqueduct piece, to control when access is available or not, by the way we operate and whether we're operationally affected. So that is kind of a control point, I think, for the district and the board for wheeling proposals that would potentially be seen as a replacement for a delta conveyance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple comments, and I'll hold it until Director Patterson is gone.
You playing tag. I was just going to comment that Freeport originally was built to convey water that we had entitlement to from the American River. And so there was a long process as to how we accessed that water. Freeport was the ultimate answer. And I just want to share that because that's one of the projects that I came aboard to help facilitate because of the contact we had nationally and otherwise. We had a lot of hurdles to go through to get access, and we were at odds with Sacramento at the time. So a lot of history was made in our coming together. And part of what you have is Sacramento shares Freeport, and it uses water year-round. So the mutual benefit for both agencies and for the people we represent was on the table. And that accomplishment, that was the primary reason for it. These others came from the side. They were not the consideration at all. And that's why you have the heavy hurdle of anybody being able to use Freeport without meeting the standards that we do. And so if they can't equal those standards in terms of their access, they don't get use of it. I just wanted to make sure that that background was understood.
Thank you.
I have some comments I'll add. So on our wheeling principles, I think we will need to not just take a simplistic look to the water use efficiency criteria that we enumerated in the Marin example. I think we kind of got to the bare minimum, and I was minimally satisfied in an emergency situation. But if this were going to be under regular consideration, I would want to look at those more closely and improve them so that our infrastructure is not being abused to support an unsustainable water future. I think we need to be looking at the water use efficiency in all types of sectors and make sure that our infrastructure is used to support something that is efficient and sustainable. And so having those criteria reviewed and improved for this quite different application, I think would be pretty important. And then second, I think the board would need to better understand the assumptions for the EIR. You know how we were assuming not more frequent. Well, you know, we should find out what kind of draw was studied in the EIR and consider if there are changed conditions along the Sacramento River and affecting the delta, and just to understand what before we do anything major, we would need to understand what are the impacts on the river and the fish and other ecological criteria, so that we are aware of what was studied, aware of what changed conditions could indicate, and that we not take the environment for granted. You know, with based on our EIR that may be nearing 20 years old. My last comment would be more fiscal, so keeping in mind the comments of what other directors said, that the wear and tear of the project with its current level of use has a different profile than a wear and tear that is at higher capacity, and that replacement cost of various parts needs to be priced in. I wouldn't want to be looking at our own marginal cost without recognizing that this will accelerate wear and tear, so that it would be important to make up for that and to reserve a margin of safety for us, that there's some risk that the wear and tear is worse and has earlier breakdowns. While we can't profit, we should certainly have a generous reserve. Those are my comments about that. We can move on to recycled water.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Florence Wellington for covering our recycled water.
Thank you, Hassan. So I just want to give a quick overview of our current recycled water project. We currently have 5 non-potable projects and combined, those 5 projects have a production capacity of 9 million gallons per day. All right. Thank you. Our goal is to produce 20 million gallons per day by 2040. We do have future projects lined up that could provide an additional 11 million gallons per day. And so far, to get the 9 million gallons per day, we have invested $145 million plus state, federal, and private funding. In 2019, we updated our recycled water master plan. The plan recommended that we expand 3 of our existing projects. Those are the ones that are at the top of the figure: East Bay Shore, San Ramon Valley, and our 2 projects for Chevron, North Richmond, and Rare. The plan also recommended that we support new projects like Phillips 66 and satellite projects. And then the plan also looked into the possibility of potable reuse projects, and that will be reevaluated in our upcoming 2024 strategic plan. So since our last update, there has been some changes in regulations and legislation. In August of 2022, the governor presented the California Water Supply Strategy, and it included several statewide goals, including recycling 715 million gallons per day by 2030 and 1,600 million gallons per day by the year 2040. The Water Board is also scheduled to approve regulations on potable reuse by December of this year. And they have been reviewed and commented on by expert panels and water recycling advocacy groups. And we have been tracking those regulations all along. The governor also approved legislation that lowers the indoor water use standards, and lowering these water reuse standards, although they're really good for potable water conservation, It does provide less recycled water supply, and it does have impacts to the recycled water quality. The state also updated the Cross Connection Prevention Handbook, and this is important because it codified backflow protections to the potable water system. And then also there's been some new regulations regarding PFAS and CECs, and this is important because these regulations could affect treatment for recycled water, especially when we're looking into potable reuse options. So source and water quality are some things we've been looking into as well. So reductions in wastewater flow due to conservation and drought have a negative impact on recycled water. The wastewater flow, when it's reduced due to conservation or drought, it promotes increased water intrusion, leading to higher TDS concentrations. And it also, the lack of dilution causes higher ammonia concentrations in the wastewater. And so with the TDS and ammonia concentrations being worsened during droughts and that's when recycled water is needed the most. And recycled water with the high TDS and ammonia, it can't be used for industrial applications such as cooling tower, and it also has a negative impact on landscape irrigation. So the photo to the right, you can kind of see what a healthy plant looks like, and then the impacts of recycled water during droughts to those same types of plants. So we are currently conducting a water quality improvement pilot study. I'm sorry, I guess I didn't advance the slide there. And that's going to be completed in March of this year. And the study is going to recommend the best options for improving water quality. And once we implement the recommendations from the plan, we'll be able to increase our customer base and the types of users that we have. We'll be able to potentially increase our supply at RARE, and we'll be able to provide washdown water for Caltrans maintenance fleets. And then the president recently signed an omnibus bill that earmarked $4.2 million to extend the distribution pipeline for East Bay Shore from Emeryville to Albany. And this pipeline, once it's installed, it will increase recycled water usage for this project by 370,000 gallons per day. And the $4.2 million that we got was part of a WRDA authorization that the district got that is for $25 million. So the $4.2 million will be taken from that, but we are seeking additional funding. We're currently working with the Corps now to see if we can get another authorization that will allow us to expand our pipe distribution into Alameda. So our DURWA project, it's our joint partnership that we have with DSRSD that serves the San Ramon Valley area. And this has been a very successful project for us, although the project is supply short during peak months. And the agencies have been working to look into supplemental supply and operational strategies that can maximize our deliveries. One of the things that we did 2 years ago was DURWA entered into an agreement with Central Sand to divert some of their wastewater to DSRSD for treatment. We operated that project for the first time in 2021. We didn't have to operate it in 2022, so we're coming up in the third year of the agreement where we'll see whether or not we need to operate it this year. So the agreement, it is 3 years, and it has the option to renew for up to 5 years total. Another thing that we did for this project was the district installed flow monitoring devices on our largest recycled water users in the San Ramon area. And with those devices, we're able to get real-time data. So we've been able to alert customers when they have leaks and if they're using water off hours. And so this is a way for us to conserve our limited supply of recycled water with this project. And then most recently, DERWA hired a consultant to study other supply and operational strategies. The final report, which is due in December of this year, it'll update the supply and demand projections. It'll look at hydraulic modeling. Will review storage and operations plans, and it will evaluate supplemental supply and additional demand management strategies. And this report, it will help inform our 2024 strategic plan update. So last October, we signed an MOU with Central Sand to complete a feasibility study to evaluate 6 recycled water partnership opportunities. And then in December, we were able to finalize the work plan to include evaluating both non-potable and potable project alternatives. We're currently in the process of procuring a consultant to help us with the evaluation. And the scope includes analyzing information from previous studies, defining feasibility criteria, and evaluating each of the project concepts and developing cost estimates. Equity will definitely be a consideration when evaluating each of the project alternatives. And we expect to have that report completed by October of this year. And this will also feed into our strategic plan update. So this is just an overview of the 6 projects that we will be evaluating, and cost, feasibility, and equity will be considered. And although these are all great projects, there's not enough recycled water supply for us to implement all of the projects. So the final report will recommend a short list of projects to be considered in the recycled water strategic plan update. So we just last week we were able to issue an RFP to start on the strategic plan update. The proposals will be due March 17th, and we hope to bring a consultant contract to the board for consideration in April for that report. The final report is going to incorporate the Central Sand feasibility evaluation. It will also incorporate the results of the East Bay Shore pilot study project that we are working on to improve water quality, and it will incorporate information from the DERWA supply and operations report. It will also reevaluate recommended non-potable projects from the 2019 report. It will reevaluate potable reuse alternatives, and it will consider new recycled water goals to incorporate potable reuse. And we hope to brief the board on the progress on that report sometime in early 2024 so we can get some feedback from you all. So this slide shows what it will take to meet our current goal of 20 million gallons per day by 2040. So we need an additional 11 million gallons per day to get there, and it will cost about $343 million to add that additional 11 MGD. We're also going to be looking at some other alternatives, such as expanding from Albany to Richmond, and also expanding into over to UC Berkeley, and then also looking at potable reuse. So we have the ability to possibly increase our goal from the 20 million gallons per day. But one of the things that we will be looking at is how we can bring the costs down. So with cost sharing, maybe with other agencies or entities, funding through state or federal sources, and things like that. And then, again, we'll update the board at a future meeting on the strategic plan. So that's all that I have for recycled water. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Director Coleman?
Thank you. Big proponent of recycled water. My concern, and you mentioned it, is PFAS. Since we're not able to remove it from the system currently, maybe never, we're going to have to do a lot of measurement where the recycled water is going, how it's being used, and making sure it's not being introduced somehow into the creeks in the bay. We're thinking about that, are we not?
Yes, yes, we will definitely look at that once we get more information on how recycled water needs to be treated, what the regulations will be for PFAS for recycled water.
I would imagine not much recycled water would make it into those other waterways, but it's a huge issue, and it's an issue of equity and equality. We just need to make sure that we're protecting those who might come in contact with it or eat fish out of the bay that have additional PFAS in them because we're introducing PFAS into our system.
Well, our current standard right now is to not allow runoff of recycled water. So hopefully it won't ever make it there, but we will follow whatever regulations are in place as far as treatment for recycled water.
Thank you.
Director Young, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, just, on that last. Zero discharge of recycled water, but once the water's used, it goes into it becomes wastewater, correct?
For the recycled water?
Yeah, once the recycled water is used, it ends up going to a treatment plant, a wastewater treatment plant.
Not for irrigation customers necessarily.
Not for irrigation. No, for
And
right,
that's
not
what
for irrigation.
most of our customers are currently.
Isn't our largest use of recycled water?
That's true.
Chevron.
In terms of volume, you are correct. In terms of numbers, the number of customers is mainly irrigation. But yes, that water would be discharged.
Okay. And have we monitored for PFAS in our recycled water that we deliver? No. So we don't know. We don't know what the concentration is.
No, and I think that the federal government is planning or proposing some requirements for.
Yeah, it'll be years before
Yeah.
a PFAS standard is actually finalized, but
Yeah.
I think understanding what the PFAS levels are, as sort of Director Coleman says, I think we should know. That level, if we can find it, similar to, our drinking water, then that's great.
There is data from SFEI on effluent coming out of wastewater plants. So we
Right.
do know for those locations where we do have recycled water treatment, we do know what's entering into the treatment system. And I don't anticipate that our treatment is reducing the
Gonna add,
PFAS level at
right,
all.
right.
So it should be comparable to what's coming into those plants.
Okay.
Based on the wastewater effluent.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I would echo the concern about PFAS, and we understand that we need to make sure that our use of the recycled water system is consistent with this emerging appreciation of these chemicals. And my comments that I was planning to add are about the expansion of the system. I think it is really remarkable that UC Berkeley is interested in getting a mega lateral for its use. I've been in the initial meeting with UC Berkeley. The administration is very committed to achieving that, and we will see, if it is reasonable and cost effective. I am interested in helping them appreciate whether it is beneficial to build the lateral from the whole centralized system, or whether it's feasible to do a distributed system. And that's a type of analysis that we could apply to many industrialized customers. It's great to provide that centralized utility system when it is reasonable and feasible, and to help look at distributed systems, whether we're the operator or whether the customer is the operator or some combination of it. So I'm looking forward to more report back on that. And my last comment for recommendation is to accelerate the planning process for lateral consideration. So cities are making planning decisions about where they're going to be permitting potentially high-density buildings. A lot of these decisions are already happening, in West Berkeley, downtown Berkeley. So if we're going to be building a lateral to UC Berkeley, we should be thinking about what laterals would be able to support in downtown Berkeley, because a lot of toilet potential would be in some of those upcoming development plans. I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to require connections if that planning process gets ahead of our planning process. So I encourage looking at what cities are doing in their housing elements, which may not all be reflected in general plans. So an active consultation with the city's planning departments to see how should we be planning our laterals would help us make sure that we're leveraging the corridors along I-80 to get the most of our projects. That takes us to any other questions on?
I just
Yeah.
had a sort of a clarification. So Chevron's recycled water becomes wastewater after use, and it dumps into Richmond, right? Richmond's wastewater system?
Yeah.
So I think we should have some dialogue going on with other wastewater systems with regard to the PFAS issue, and to know what they're doing, if anything at all, and to sort of share that we might be contributing. And at Phillips 66, I know right now it's pie in the sky, I think, but where would Phillips 66 wastewater go? What's out there?
West County, no.
It-
Or does Pinole
They-
operate its own?
I think Pinole does.
I think they do.
Yeah, the recycled water that we would use for that facility would come from Pinole Hercules and Rodeo's
Okay.
treatment plants. But
Yeah.
I'm wondering if both Chevron and P66 have their own discharge. Do you know, Linda? I think they have their own discharge permits, and I'm not sure that it goes back to the
We do.
treatment.
So at Chevron right now, so after we send them the recycled water, it actually goes on site at the refinery through their own treatment process.
Okay.
And then they have a discharge MPDS.
All right, so it does not go through Richmond's wastewater system.
No.
No, it goes, most of it goes through Chevron's treatment system.
Okay.
So I would imagine that if we have a project with P66 in the future, it'd be a very similar setup.
Okay, thank you.
If we don't have go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I'll just quickly add, as far as UC Berkeley, I mean, depending on whether or not they have a distributed system or we build kind of a centralized system and distribute out there, would also govern whether or not other customers can build off of it. So there's quite a bit of discussion that's needed. I know in our initial discussions with UC Berkeley, their preference is not to have a distributed system and just have the water supply from East Bay Mud. They'd rather not have that infrastructure they'd have to maintain.
Yeah, and it would be, as the director representing the area, knowing that the city of Berkeley is planning a lot of growth and development along in the downtown area, which is right next to the university, and along University Avenue, that can be priced in and would be a benefit of building a whole lateral. So that's one example among many. I think there's a lot of planning going on, and if we sit out and don't identify where our laterals can benefit new potential recycled water customers, then we'll miss the opportunity to ask those cities to condition approval on building dual plumbing. So we should act reasonably quickly to not lose those opportunities. It's, sounds like we can move on to groundwater.
Yes.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll introduce Grace Sue.
Thank you, Florence. Good morning. So today, we'll be providing an update on our 2 groundwater supplemental supply projects. We have the Bayside Phase 1 project and the Dream project. A reminder of the locations of these projects. Bayside, that's an aquifer storage and recovery well located in the southwest part of our service area in San Lorenzo. And then over upcountry in San Joaquin County is the Dream project. That's the pilot in lieu groundwater banking project that EBMUD is conducting in partnership with North San Joaquin Water Conservation District, San Joaquin County, Eastern Water Alliance. And then over to the right is a plot showing the amount of project drought supply for the 2 projects in the blue bars, and then in the gray is the potential drought supply if these programs were to be expanded in the future, and that potential supply is based on the WSMP 2040. For Bayside, the current existing well has a capacity of up to 1,000 acre feet per year of drought supply. For Dream, it's a total amount because it's a pilot project of 500 acre feet. So I want to highlight the update on Dream first. We actually have an exciting update to provide. We achieved a milestone just a week ago of completing the startup extraction testing of the new facilities that were constructed last year to deliver groundwater into our aqueducts. So over a period of about 2 weeks, we injected about 40 acre feet of groundwater into McCollum Aqueduct 1. And that groundwater was blended with surface water. And that's a big milestone. You're probably aware we have been trying to bring groundwater from San Joaquin County over to the East Bay for about 30 years. So that is finally something we've accomplished and wanted to highlight. We do still need to, of course, finish the pilot, evaluate the results and lessons learned. We have released about 1/3 of the McCollum River water that's being provided to North San Joaquin for this project. So about 342 acre feet to be exact has been released. So we still have to release 2/3 of that. 1,000 acre feet is the total for this project. And when surplus water is available, we'll be able to make those releases. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And in parallel, we are evaluating preliminary concepts for a larger groundwater banking program in San Joaquin County. We are in discussions with the partners on that. So as far as the surplus water, whether it's available this year, we still have to wait a little longer. We are currently evaluating whether we have surplus water available relative to state regulations. So at the second board meeting in April, you'll be presented with the water supply availability deficiency report and be provided the water supply conditions assessment for the water year. Typically at that meeting, back in 2019, there was a preliminary determination whether that surplus water was available, but staff makes a final determination after that report comes out whether or not it's available for surplus to our needs and obligations. If it is determined and confirmed that we have surplus water available, then we can proceed with scheduling storing of the surplus water, and that the scheduling of when that occurs depends on project specific requirements and conditions. For instance, with Dream, we have to work with our partners to ensure the timing coincides with when they need it for irrigation. So that's the update. Oh, yeah, sure.
The bottom line is, will we know this year in time to be able to take advantage of the surplus water at all? Or?
Well, I think I'll maybe, I think there will be a determination in time, but it's still, you know, will occur after the April water supply deficiency report.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to move on now to the update on Bayside. This update focuses primarily on East Bay MUD's discussions with Oraloma Sanitary District's board last year related to their consideration of extending our lease with them. The lease expires in August of 2024. And if you look on the right, the figure has a yellow outlined area showing the area that's being leased from Oraloma. That parcel of property contains the Bayside well, the injection extraction well, along with four of the monitoring wells that are part of the project. And just a quick reminder of what has been done utilizing the Bayside well. We have recharged between 2017 and 2019 a total of about 55 acre feet. We have not, however, needed to extract.
Janetta, is there a way to move where the spotlight is on the Zoom so that we can see the key? Because I can't read the key on my paper. Just like to change where it is. Yes, thank you. Yeah, up, over, put it over our logo.
Oh.
No, not.
Sorry.
Yeah, undo the Zoom.
Undo the Zoom, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not the display, it's the,
It's what's behind it.
it's the picture. Move it up over to our, up over our logo if you can. Not, no, don't.
It was, but it doesn't seem to.
I'm sorry, I'm creating more.
Sorry, Robert.
Can't you go to slideshow?
Control L.
Yeah, I think I was just finishing.
Yeah,
just
that's
saying,
better.
Yeah. Is that better?
Thank
Okay.
you.
And just, yeah, the last point I think on this slide, just to mention that we have not needed to extract using Bayside for droughts or emergencies yet. So ahead of our discussions with Oraloma, we conducted updated hydraulic modeling to look at the area over which the Bayside water is distributed and the percentage of the supply when it's in operation. And this is what this figure shows. So the area over which Bayside water gets distributed extends roughly from 2 to 4 miles away from the well. And the percentage of supply received within that area ranges between 5 to 100%. So just a reminder that the Bayside well is located in the deep aquifer zone, about 600 acre feet. It's protected by thick clay layers from shallow groundwater impacts. If Bayside were to be used for potable purposes, the water would be treated and the water quality would meet or exceed all state and federal standards. So this is the summary of the discussions that we had with Oraloma last year. So in August, we presented the board an update on Bayside, and as a result of that discussion, the board requested a workshop to be held because they had more questions on the project that they wanted to be discussed in more detail. And so we went back in mid-September to present on the questions that we received from the board via email, and and then following that, a week later, the board met to consider the lease extension, but however, they did not vote to extend the lease beyond the August 2024 date. The public was present during these meetings. Some of the key concerns that were raised were related to environmental justice, subsidence, and water quality. So next steps, East Bay Mud will plan for a replacement Bayside well to be constructed on nearby East Bay Mud property. That would be the property where our existing water treatment facility for Bayside is located. And also, we will need to address concerns raised by Oraloma and the local community groups through community engagement. And so the approach for community engagement is shown in this slide. Here we have previously, the project had a very active Bayside Community Liaison group during the design and construction of the project. We are planning to re-engage that group and have updated the list recently. We have provided that list to Oraloma's general manager, and are waiting to get additional feedback from their board on any additional individuals that need to be added to the list. The frequency for meeting, we're expecting quarterly to biannual, with the first meeting by June of this year. For meeting notifications, we'll send out mail and email to the participants on the CLG list, and we also want to make sure we do additional outreach to the community that are potentially interested beyond just the list, and so we will use Nextdoor for that outreach. And that is the final one for under groundwater. So I'll pause before Los Vaqueros.
Director Young and then Director Coleman.
Yeah, so I want to, I mean, I should defer to Doug, actually, as the person that represents folks here, but I think it would be helpful to, make sure that this board has a full understanding of those concerns raised during the Oraloma process and decision, and that we are including the, I guess there's a San Lorenzo MAC, would there be, because it's unincorporated? And San Leandro City Council? Or so that we're not just dealing with, Oraloma's kind of out of it at this point. If they're ending, their lease, they're a neighbor, but that's it, right? Or am I wrong about that? They'll end up being.
Well, they're still going to be a neighbor. We would
right, but they're a neighbor. I mean, it's not.
Yeah. Right. But we would still continue to include them in notifications.
And is that it's sort of ancient history now because it's 20 years ago, but why did we decide to do the well on Oraloma property instead of our own?
I think at the time we didn't have that parcel of property that was owned by East Bay Mud, and we had already started the process of evaluating at that location with a pilot test well.
Wasn't there an existing well there also?
They Oraloma had, I'm not sure what the status is, but they do have an existing well, or had an existing well on their property there. That's correct.
Before we go to Director Coleman, about how much will this cost, the Oraloma's decision to change their mind about the partnership and for us to start over effectively? How much will that cost us?
Well, the lease is currently, I believe, about $9,000 a year. So that's what they would lose roughly a year, and for our costs, that's costs are for well installation and drilling have been skyrocketing. It's a, you know, kind of probably a little challenging to give a very close estimate, but probably somewhere in the, you know, $5 million range.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about that number than the 9,000
Sure,
of
of
savings,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
per year. Yeah, that is, and this was a pilot well, so we would probably still have had to have more capital expense for the current project, even if they changed their mind and continued to renew the lease. Would there be some capital cost less than 5 million? I was wondering about the
For
cost.
our ongoing needs with the project?
Yeah, I was wondering about like kind of a counterfactual cost difference. That's what I was wondering. So I think you just described $5 million that we will now have to expend to construct on our own site. But if they had renewed, what would the cost have been to further develop the pilot? None or some?
I think the question is, what would it have cost to go to phase 2?
Oh, phase 2. I don't recall the number that was based. Do you recall, Mike, the WSMP number for phase 2?
So I actually thought the question was, if not for losing the lease, how much would we have to spend
Yes.
if we remained on the lease? And the answer to that is we would have to put in filtration treatment for a cost of, I believe, less than $1 million, around $1 million. So out of that 5 million, maybe 4 million is a new cost because of the termination of the lease.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very significant cost differential, and you know, if this is because of science that tells us that there is poor water quality, that we would be, you know, serving customers of the district, I don't think any member of this board would want to be doing that. And I believe that we have been studying this and have wouldn't proceed with phase 2 if we weren't sure that it would be safe for customers. So I really hope that we can engage Orloma about the decision, you know, while pursuing this path. If we're unable to do so, it would be a shame for lack of information to cost the district's ratepayers $4 million. That would be quite unfortunate. Director Coleman?
Great, thank you. So what was the reasoning that the Orloma board gave not to renew the lease when we discussed it with them last year?
Mike, you want to?
Sorry, yeah, I was there. They didn't really give a reason. They voted against it. So
No comments were made?
Many of the board members had comments. Several of those board members expressed some of the same comments that were expressed from the public regarding water quality concerns. You know, from their perspective, it wasn't fair that their community was getting water from Bayside where other communities were getting, you know, water from the McKelmy, for example. So that was one of their arguments. I think that was maybe the main one. They also had concerns about subsidence and some other things like that.
Yeah, those were the issues they brought up many years ago.
Yes.
So we've never drawn from the Bayside, correct? And we've stored 50,
We've never delivered water to our customers from Bayside.
and it's 55 acre feet we have stored there.
Mm-hmm.
If they do not renew the lease, are we able to extract that water before the lease expires and bring it into our system?
Well, at this point, we don't have all the water treatment and filtration in place to extract and deliver that into our distribution system. In addition, we need to get permit from Department of Drinking Water. So we aren't, like, if we wanted to extract this year, for instance, we are not at a point to do so.
So how long would it take to get the necessary permits? I guess what I'm thinking is we've already invested a lot of money, as Director Katz has talked about, and Director Lenny was on the forefront with Director Mellon at the time, and it'd be a shame if they're not going to renew the lease that the 55 acre feet of water that we stored, we're not able to recover.
Sorry, Grace. Yeah, go ahead.
As long as we drill a well on our property, we will still be able to access the
Okay.
same aquifer and recover that water at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to point out that, one of the problems here obviously is that even if we were able to talk Oraloma into renewing the lease, we still have this hostage situation. That should the board change there or whatever that, I mean, obviously if we have a longer term lease, we would have legality on our side, but we still might have a problem there. And so for such an important project, I think it's difficult for us not to have land that would actually be leased by us or that we own to be able to drill that on there. So I think that's a situation that unfortunately hadn't foreseen, but now that it's here, hard to see any other way around it, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, there are extreme options, but I think that's a compelling reason to try to have certainty in the best way that we can achieve it. Any other comments about groundwater? I have one more thought about DREAM, and that's just to really appreciate that this is a major milestone, as you described. It seems so quietly occurring, but this has been something we have talked about for years. It's just a small amount, but it really feels like the dream is awakened, and I'm very excited to hear this report, and I hope that we are able to continue to advance it. Obviously the purpose of banking would not be to have water released during a really wet year like this, but this is the kind of year that really helps us appreciate that this is when we can bank. So and we given the extreme weather, we may have more extremes of drought where we need the banked water, and more wet years, extremely wet years where we need to take advantage of that banking. I'm very excited to be moving ahead. Yeah, Director Coleman.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I forgot to ask, going back on slide 3, this is related to banking, the excess water that we may receive in some years could, due to extreme rainfall and weather. Are we looking at acquiring or working with partners below Comanche who have fields where we could actually, or in that bank area where during extreme weather we could flood their fields like they do in the Midwest, and they get paid for the period that their fields are not operating, they're fallow, and recharging the groundwater basin that way. That's what they do on the Mississippi with the Corps of Engineers, and we don't do that in California except the most common areas, Yolo bypass. But that's a great way to recharge groundwater basins. It's a good way to get sediment back on the agricultural lands, and it's a state policy, but the state is actually doing nothing, to my knowledge, on this area.
Well, there is a lot of flood managed aquifer recharge occurring in the Central Valley, and that our partners are involved in that, like North San Joaquin is involved in doing some of the flood irrigation of vineyards, for instance. So it is being pursued. It's always tricky in California with the water rights to be able to do those types of activity. In fact, yesterday there was just an article about that in the New York Times. Trying to be able to utilize this type of excess water is challenging, because of lack of infrastructure funding and the water rights issues. But it is being done.
Within our basin, not in our service area.
The East Bay Plain sub-basin.
Between Comanche and the Delta.
Yes. So like I was mentioning, our partners like North San Joaquin Water Conservation District, which is in that San Joaquin County area where DREAM is actively has projects that are doing this flood managed recharge.
That's good to hear. Could we get maybe a memo update on that? Just what areas and who the partners are?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
And let's, if there's no further questions about groundwater, let's go on to Los Vaqueros.
All right, so I'll also be providing the update on Los Vaqueros. Just a quick reminder about the project. It's to expand the existing Contra Costa Water District's reservoir, 115,000 acre feet. East Bay MUD is evaluating whether to secure 30,000 acre feet of storage. East Bay MUD is one of the 8 voting members of the JPA that was formed in 2021. The project capital costs are currently estimated at $980 million. There's a California Water Commission grant of $477 million. The current estimated cost for East Bay MUD for the capital cost is between $65 to $130 million. And just a reminder on the benefits to East Bay MUD for this project. It addresses 2 of our goals in our strategic plan to ensure high quality water for the future. That 30,000 acre feet that's also located west of the Delta would help to improve our reliability during droughts and emergencies, provides resilience to climate change, and integrates with regional partnerships. Los Vaqueros is one of the drought contingency plan projects that the Bay Area Regional Reliability Partners had identified. And in addition, this project also helps to meet our goal to surpass environmental standards and protect public trust values by providing environmental water through gain sharing and helping to support the wildlife refuges. So some of the key milestones to date on this project, the environmental documents have been finalized. Of course, the formation of the JPA. East Bay MUD completed the wheeling fees for the project. The JPA was invited last year to apply for the WIFIA loan, and planning and pre-design of a number of the key facilities that will be constructed or modified for this project are underway. And that includes the Walnut Creek, East Bay MUD's Walnut Creek Variable Frequency Drive planning, and that just started at the beginning of this year. And if you look at the Gantt chart on the right, so the facilities that will be constructed or modified are shown in the blue and the orange bars. And now I just want to move to the top of the Gantt chart of looking at the schedule for the agreements. The next number of slides will focus on talking about the upcoming agreements, since that's the key focus in the upcoming year. So this schedule is the tentative but ambitious schedule from the JPA to complete negotiating key agreements by September of this year, ahead of the award hearing that they are targeting with the California Water Commission in October. So these are the key agreements, upcoming agreements that the JPA are working on. On the left, the interim funding agreement, the JPA has currently proposed to put that on hold and to continue instead to use the multi-party agreement to fund the project up until the service agreement is executed. And I'll have more information in the next slide on the service agreement, but that's really the key focus currently that the JPA is honed in on for the agreements. In addition, at least with the JPA members, the JPA is also working on the agreement to the contracts for administration of public benefits. So that's the agreement that between the JPA and DWR and Department of Fish and Wildlife to ensure that the public benefits for the project are realized. And then on the right are agreements that the JPA will need to negotiate with CCWD and East Bay MUD for the facility usage. So that's the agreement that spells out the terms and conditions for the when and so forth of the usage of the key facilities for the project. Also, we need to negotiate the O&M and design and construction with the JPA and CCWD and East Bay MUD, and those will be separate from the CCWD and the East Bay MUD's EBMUD agreements will be separate. So I do want to, in the next slide, focus on the, just to give you the purpose of the service agreement, since this is a key agreement that we're working on and negotiating. This is the agreement that will allocate the cost of service among the members. The JPA provides services to the members that's primarily related to water storage and conveyance. And then in return, the members may make payments or provide other non-monetary benefits. The cost of service that are covered in this service agreement are the facility usage fees, O&M costs, and design and construction costs. So as mentioned, the JPA has an ambitious schedule to have the service agreement executed by September. However, there are key issues that need to be resolved on the service agreement along with the other project agreements. And so here we have categorized the key issues that still need to be resolved in these three categories: water supply and storage, or four categories: water supply and storage costs, wheeling conditions, and permits. So under the first category of water supply and storage, one of the key issues for EBMUD is to secure a source of water supply for the project. So all the member agencies do have to secure their own source of water supply. So this is an issue we're actively working on, and we have let the JPA know we anticipate needing approximately about a year to secure the source of water supply. And our proposed approach is to develop a portfolio of water supply source options for the project. The two next bullets under this category: priority in and out of the reservoir, allocation of usage rights for conveyance and storage. Those are being discussed. The JPA just recently formed subgroups that consist of staff from all of the member agencies, and we are actively discussing these issues. Under cost, we continue to evaluate the cost of the project to ensure its cost effectiveness. We get updates on the costs for estimates for the facilities. We still need to also work out the issue of allocation of the costs, ensure that that is fair and equitable, and also understand the allocation of the public benefits funding. And so these issues under these first two categories will be addressed in one or more of the agreements that are listed below those boxes. And then another category of issues is looking at wheeling conditions. Hassan, at the beginning of this workshop talked about the wheeling issue. So we want to be sure that if we were to wheel for the partners on this project, we must meet EBMUD's needs first and not have any adverse impacts. And these key issues will be addressed in the EBMUD facilities usage agreement. Under wheeling conditions, we are also evaluating the possibility of providing backstop water to Contra Costa Water District. That's when the dam is being constructed and out of service for Contra Costa Water District. They will need to have backstop water to meet their water quality goals. So we're in the process of evaluating that. That will be, if we are able to provide that water, that will be addressed in a separate agreement with CCWD. And then finally, permits are another key issue that are being worked on. That's being done in progress by the JPA and Contra Costa Water District, but there's a number of permits that are in progress, and those all need to be in place and approved before the award hearing. So these issues will be addressed in parallel as we negotiate the agreements. And here is just a little more detailed view of the JPA's proposed schedule for the key upcoming agreements. So, as mentioned, they have this accelerated time frame of getting the agreements executed and approved by September ahead of that October date, their target date. So our proposed approach, if the JPA does need to maintain this accelerated schedule, is to preserve critical off-ramps in the upcoming agreements. Those off-ramps include the inability to store and access supply, other members withdrawing, engineers estimate too high, unacceptable conditions on the grant funding, an inability to secure water supply, and unacceptable permit conditions. Now, clearly we have a lot ahead of us here in the next number of months. The plan is to have several planning committee meetings scheduled. We already have one planned in May to discuss, the progress of the project and to, get more details, feedback from the board members on the planning committee. And also there may be also additional requests from the JPA for funding. And, we would have discussions with the planning committee ahead of the board making any, considering any actions. And then this is the last slide on Los Vaqueros. We do want to point out about this is related to evaluating the sources of supply for the project. We are evaluating the possibility of using recycled water credits to transfer McCollum water. This is a similar approach that was successfully used for DREAM. It does not require a refill agreement. The transfer of water involves McCollum water that EBMUD would have diverted for consumptive use, but the customers use recycled water instead. And the potential range of credits for using recycled water is up to 10,000 to 22,000 acre feet annually. And with that, I'll pause and take questions and comments on Los Vaqueros.
Somebody's pushing the mute button off for me. Well, I think with Mike Togolini stepping in for me on the JPA board, I think that's good for EBMUD, considering Mike has such strong knowledge of our water supply issues and needs, as well as Los Vaqueros. I think this is a great project for regional governance. In addition, it's actually not that expensive when you're talking about potentially 30,000 acre feet of water, not counting the range of credits due to recycled water credits for the amount of money that we were looking at spending between $65 and $130 million. So when you look at that and combine it all, it's good for our customers and it's good for our region.
Thanks. So yeah, I had the same issue with the mute. Thank you. So I'm wondering about these, the off-ramp schedule. I'm looking back at slide 42 and thinking about, what's the period, the time period for study? At our last board consideration of continuing to invest in this partnership, we weren't sure what the timeline would be for actually getting the planning studies to the point where we would be able to evaluate these off-ramps, and it looks like this is the plan for agreements, but in terms of developing studies, what is that time frame? Clearly we need to have the off-ramps preserved if the studies aren't completed, but what are the plans for and the timeline for those studies? Because we will be likely contributing more operating costs over the coming quarters, and this would be if the board is going to give direction about accelerating the timeline for those planning studies, or just letting it go on its normal plan, that's why I wanted to ask the question and raise that point for discussion. And
So-
I feel like Director Young would contribute to the question and frame it, better than I just stated, so I'd like her to go before answering the question.
Yeah, I actually don't know. My question was a question about some other
Okay,
elements.
you raised this issue at a prior board meeting, so
Yeah.
I echoed that just now, so I'll please go ahead.
So I think one of the biggest, as I mentioned, issues that we still need to study is our source of water supply. Currently, we estimate needing about another year to do those studies and to get to a point where we feel we have, a path forward on that. That's likely the study that will require the longest time to resolve, some of the key issues that are shown in this slide. Another big one is the wheeling conditions, and we're, in the process of evaluating that. We are waiting for some updated modeling results from Contra Costa Water District to, do some additional evaluation of, the frequency of use and to, go through what we need to internally to determine, how that would look in the facilities usage agreement. And we anticipate that could be, with over the calendar year. So our time frame for, working through some of our key issues, and we have already let the JPA know as well, is longer, a longer time period than what they're currently proposing with the September deadline for the agreements.
So that's your answer does kind of re-raise this question for me is like so if they're aiming for the CWC award to be like the lockdown date, and after that, our ability, our studies won't be done. So, do we preserve those off ramps even after the grant?
That's what we're proposing. Yes, that's what we propose is the approach. If they are maintaining this schedule to complete the agreements, we do need to preserve those off ramps that for issues we have not.
After the fall of this year.
Correct. That's what we propose.
Okay, because this is their proposed schedule.
Yes,
we don't have our schedule up here.
No, but as I said, our schedule does not sync with what they're proposing currently.
So what happens if
And so that's why we have this. We do need to keep these off ramps in place if we're going to continue if these agreements are.
I guess that's my question. Do we have those off ramps even we're at odds with the JPA on these issues right now, right? So how does that get resolved? Do we just walk? I'm trying to understand how it.
Yeah, so we actually had a meeting yesterday just with the general managers to talk about this, and we weren't the only ones that expressed concerns about the lack of details that we're seeing from the service agreement and then their accelerated timeline. And so what I think Grace is also sharing is, we have proposed that if you're going to stick to that timeline, as far as when you need the Water Commission approval, that we have these off-ramps in place to say that if after our studies are done, on whether we can get a water supply, on our costs, that it doesn't meet our needs, then we have those off-ramps to walk away from the project. I don't think we are the only ones that have this issue, but they have this deadline right now that we're telling them we can't complete all of our studies in time. And so we don't want to get to a point where we sign on without the off-ramps, and then there is no way to back out.
Right. Yeah, and as I currently understand it too, once as it's written with the agreements currently, I think the off-ramps are essentially closed after the service agreement is signed, more or less, at the way the agreements are currently signed. That's why we need to, if this schedule is going to be accelerated, we have to preserve the key off-ramps.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay. And then my other question is just sort of understanding, how many 1,000 acre feet of storage, local storage, do we have this side of the Delta with San Pablo and USL and Briones.
Roughly 150, 160,000 acre feet.
Okay.
And that's in the past been timed to be about 6 months worth. We've had some population growth, but we've also had a lot of conservation, structural conservation. So is it actually stretching to more than 6 months?
No, it is structured to be 6 months, but with the understanding that there's going to be some significant cutbacks from our customers to achieve that 6 months. So it's not 6 months at the regular level of demand. If we have to get to that 6 month supply, the customers will be cutting their usage back.
If we lost our aqueducts.
If we lost the aqueducts.
Got it. So that was 6 months with an emergency rationing. You know, that's
And, yeah.
yeah.
And as part of, in that, I mean, this is why I think about the only reason that I really support this project is if we lose our aqueducts in an earthquake, or there's some 12-year drought or something like that. And in both of those cases, everybody wants that, whatever, 275, everybody wants their piece of that 275,000 acre feet NLV, right? Is part of what we want to seek assurance for is that we get that 30,000 acre feet when we need it, under
Yes.
any circumstances?
Well, yeah, under the drought and emergencies, that we would be utilizing it for, yeah.
Right, so, if you add up all of those molecules of water that presumably would be in this, in the expanded LV, do we know, when will we, I mean, we're saying up to 30,000 acre feet. When will we know what the other partners, I guess my question, I'm just wondering, is, will there be enough water to go around at the end of the day? Or is that something that we'll know?
That has to be negotiated in terms of allocating that 115,000 acre feet. That's something we're discussing right now in these subgroups that have been formed. Currently, yeah, it's oversubscribed. There's a lot of interest in.
Right, that's
it.
my
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah, but no, that 115,000 has to be allocated and worked out.
And do we know
Well,
what our minimum is?
For
back
East Bay
out?
Mud?
Yeah,
Oh, we've always been 30,000, so.
no,
it's-
that's our up to 30,000. We walk if we can't get at least, X. What's X?
I think we've always said in 30,000.
Well, we're 30 or no,
I don't
30
think
go
we-
or no go.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
a
think we
line.
have a line to
Okay.
share with you today,
Alright.
but if we get to that point, we will absolutely have that conversation with the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments about Freeport? Do we need any information covered in a memo, like the timelines ahead that might be helpful, just to confirm what our next steps are in terms of the board receiving updates on our study timeline and the scope of those studies, so that I think that would help for the record.
Yeah, we can provide the study timelines. Right now, we have some plans to bring information back to the planning committee, but that's also pending some additional information that we receive from the project. And I think it's also important just to understand, for Mike, who's going to be on the JPA, that the understanding is, these off-ramps are critical to be in the service agreement. If we were to continue to move forward and that timeline for the service agreement needs to be maintained, that we need to be able to preserve those off-ramps. That is critical for East Bay Mud. And that's what I'm hearing from this board.
Okay.
Okay, and before we move on to the remaining topics on the agenda, so we have a break blocked in, but I think we knew that this would be an ambitious amount of material. We have conservation and AMI still remaining. If we would if we keep board comments really short, we may be able to breeze through it. We could also, skip our break and only cover one of these and defer the other. General Manager, what do you
I think just given the timeline, this has happened in the past where we just had to come back and finish up the workshop. I would suggest maybe we not take the break, maybe do the AMI piece, because I think that's the shorter piece, and then we'll come back and finish up the conservation, the VA piece. The AMI piece is relatively short, and then we'll plan to do the other topics after.
That sounds good. Everybody agree? All right.
Yeah, a question.
Yes.
So I don't know if this is within the confines of the, Brown Act or anything else. I mean, is there a way to, we have a pretty short agenda this afternoon. I'm just wondering if there's the possibility to entertain finishing up the workshop at the conclusion of the board meeting, or whether we'd have to notice that
We
again.
could certainly recess our meeting and reconvene later, but we would really need to know that our staff are available and
Yeah,
aren't
no, I
overscheduled.
understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we have a pretty light agenda.
Yeah, I mean, staff will be available to present.
Charles is like, that's not how I spend my afternoon.
Sorry, Charles.
Yeah, I certainly would want to be sensitive to staff and board schedules. We could do that. Anybody have any?
Yeah, I cannot reconvene after a board meeting today. I have something else.
Even if we're done at like 2 o'clock.
We're never done at 2 o'clock.
Well, but the agenda's really short.
If you surprise me and we're done at 2 o'clock, I can accommodate. Otherwise, no.
Okay. And it sounds like the remaining time on this would be,
We'll do AMI, and then, again, if it turns out that the board meeting is short, we'll reconvene and start with conservation.
okay. So if we indeed do have a short board meeting, we can recess this workshop meeting to 2 o'clock, and then if we are running later than that, then we will continue it to we will adjourn that meeting and continue it to another day. Does that sound okay? All right. Let's
Okay,
take up.
and with that,
that.
I'll let Casey.
Good morning, President Katz, members of the board. This portion of the workshop today is focused on advanced metering infrastructure, and in December, the Planning Committee received a presentation on the findings from a project where we estimated the costs and benefits of AMI for all customers, as well as the payback periods. And so this presentation will show the highlights from that Planning Committee presentation. There was a question that was asked during the Planning Committee presentation that's included in this presentation, and then finally I'll give you a preview of the next steps of AMI at the district. And last year, the district worked with a consultant, Black & Veatch, to estimate the costs and benefits of AMI for all customers. They took our existing AMI system, the data from that system, as well as their own experience from other AMI projects, and they estimated that AMI for all of our customers would be, the present worth would be 165 to 190 million. They also estimated the payback periods for systems like that at East Bay MUD, and they estimated that it would be 14 to 17 year payback periods. So these are considered long payback periods. And the takeaway from the study was that if there was any decision to expand AMI at East Bay MUD, it would have to be motivated by factors other than financial payback. At the Planning Committee presentation, the Planning Committee responded by declining to expand AMI for the reasons shown here, for their cost, as well as no vendor has an overwhelming share of the market. At the Planning Committee, Director Young asked a question about the replacement cost of an AMI system, and that's the subject of this slide. So we're switching to 2022 dollars in this figure. And just to get you oriented, in the first 3 years, in years 1, 2, and 3, the district would be constructing a full-scale AMI system, and so you see that these are the cumulative costs for the project. It'd be followed by an operations and maintenance phase, and then because these systems don't last forever, they do need to be replaced. And so the additional costs you see in years 18, 19, and 20 are the costs to replace the existing AMI system. And so those costs are 55 to 110 million, and they would represent about 26 to 41% of the overall cost of an AMI system. So the takeaway from this slide is that once you build an AMI project, the costs to replace it are significant.
Well, and by the time it paid itself back, you're spending money to replace it, basically. You get a year free, and then it's, right? Or a year or two.
This particular example pays for itself in year 14. So it does have a few years of payback, but then you're in the process of replacing it in years 18, 19, 20. So with that, the district has some plans for its AMI system. So we have an existing AMI system that is substantial, and it may be statistically significant to represent all of our single-family customers as a class, so that we can answer questions about the impact of conservation outreach, pricing signals with our customers, and then also determining if AMI helps us understand peak water use by our customers. And so the district's going to be partnering with statisticians and behavioral economists at UC Berkeley to help us answer some of these questions. We can also get data from third-party devices that customers install on their own meters. One example is Flume. That could be an expanded rebate, although the district would prefer to have the customers have some ownership over it. And then the vendors for other third-party devices are willing to share the anonymized data with the district, so that we can further have another data set to understand the impact of conservation messaging, the impact of peak water use, those kinds of things in our service area, without spending as much money as a full AMI system. That's the final slide for the AMI portion. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Coleman?
Thank you. Of the 20,000 meters that we have approximately, the data we're getting back, how effective has it been in terms of saving water, letting customers know that they have a leak and getting the leak fixed? The return on value, I guess I'm looking at.
So we did a one-year study with UC Davis where which we answered that question. And so the estimates vary, depends on how you treat the outliers, but from 4 to 8% water savings is how much we got from the customers who had AMI and they had access to our customer portal.
And how many acre feet is that, approximately?
I believe it would be about 13. It was about 13 MGD. So if someone can help me with some math quickly. Thank you. I think I heard 8 or 9,000 acre feet.
That's substantial. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the main takeaway just from the AMI discussion here is that, we're proceeding not with a full AMI system, but we want to make sure with some confirmation that the partial AMI system can get us most of the benefits at a much lower cost. And I just want to make sure that we have the support of the board with that approach, that was the recommendation from the planning committee. Okay, thank you. I haven't heard anything. And then
Actually, one question. If we go with this UC Berkeley, when or if we expand our marketing or distribution of the Flume devices or the other on-meter third-party systems that the vendors will give us anonymized data, will that data be sufficient to subject it to the same kind of research approach that we're talking about with UC to see, compare AMI to people that have Flume, for instance?
Yes, so we have, presently we have 2,100 customers who have Flume devices in our service area. And we can use that as a second data set for UC Berkeley to analyze to help us answer some of these questions.
Well, it seemed like it would make sense to do so that we could see if we deployed it further, whether we then could extrapolate those impacts as well compared to AMI.
And that's part of, I think, what we're going to be looking at as well.
Yes, that's in our proposal for the Center for Smart Infrastructure.
Yeah. I've just been advised by Derek that we will not be able to resume the meeting this afternoon without 24 hours notice. So we can come back. I was looking at the agenda for the next board meeting. I think with the 2 topics, we can probably fit it in and finish up this workshop at the March meeting.
Okay, all right, we will consider the remaining items at a future meeting. Before we wrap up, I'd like to open it up for public comment to see if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on what we've just talked about.
I currently have no speaker cards or hands raised.
Then this workshop meeting is adjourned.